Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring back Paul Raferson. Hey Paul, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Let's do our year in review. It's been a while since you've been on. So would you mind giving the audience a little bit of background on yourself before we get going?
Sure. And is this going to be a video or audio, just static, or both?
It's audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at my camera picture and I see I have very, very red lips. And I was out in the cold, snowy New York area weather last night, and I have to use lip gloss because I'm all chapped up. Not that that's relevant to my background. It's very funny because I'm looking at my picture and I'm like, wow, I have really red lips on camera now because it's all.
It's fine. The lipstick looks good on you, mate. So,
Thank
do you want to give the audience a bit of background on yourself?
Absolutely. Sorry for that detour.
That's fine.
Yeah. So my name is Paul Rafelson. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for almost 15 years. Spent most of my life as an in-house tax lawyer focusing in litigation against the government. I was in-house at Microsoft, Walmart, GE. After GE sort of went up and moved to Boston, I sort of got sucked into this world of helping Amazon sellers with tax law issues, mainly coming from the state sales tax arena. And sort of from there snowballed into really just becoming a broader lawyer for the Amazon community. And that sort of went two ways. One is I have a law firm, FRS or ecomattorneys.com, where myself and my two partners, we basically focus on practicing law for Amazon and other e-commerce businesses, not just Amazon. The majority of our clients, are very heavy Amazon, but we are an e-commerce law firm sort of focusing on the issues and looking at those issues from, the perspective of, how can you be a small business and sell into the national economy these days and not run amok of all these crazy laws that are out there. So we help Amazon sellers with all sorts of legal issues, with selling their businesses is becoming a bigger thing that we're handling, which I love because that takes me back to my old days. And of course, Amazon suspensions, IP infringement. And then the other path that took me down was I helped start up this online sellers trade association that we called the Online Merchants Guild, or OMG. And through that, which is something I volunteer, sellers contribute, they join. And when they contribute, we use the revenues to basically either lobby or take legal action, so advocate for the seller community. So I do spend a lot of my time as a volunteer because I believe in the cause of, having a fair environment for the small businesses that can sell through the platforms like Amazon or just in e-commerce in general. And so we sort of are constantly trying to track laws and track sort of the pulse of what's going on and try to give sellers a voice so that, when in the US Congress is considering laws that might impact our businesses, we want to make sure that the seller's voice is heard and understood. And so sort of putting that power numbers together and trying to get sellers to band together.
Sounds good. So we'll start our year in review. Let's go back to, I think it was the beginning of the year. Let's kick off things with sales tax. Give us an update of where we are with that. Obviously, there was a few breakthroughs. I'll let you explain.
Yeah, sales tax was interesting. We started, so for the last 2+ years, we've had Amazon sellers being told by a number of states that they have to register in 50 states or 45 of the 50 states that have a sales tax, collect sales tax, potentially pay income tax, and also pay back taxes. So if you've been selling since 2012, it's now 2019. You've got California saying that, Amazon sellers owe, 7 years of back taxes because they didn't collect the tax from the customer. So, I've always advocated that that's wrong for a number of reasons. Some of it has to do with U.S. constitutional law. Some of it has to do with the state law. But one of the things we did is we initiated legal action against California last year, which led to the introduction of a tax law change, which requires Amazon to collect. They're called the marketplace facilitator laws. And not just in California, we advocated across the country and been advocating because we think that's the only legal way the tax law can be enforced. And so where we stand today is, through lobbying efforts and other advocacy work, we basically have it where I think there's only about a handful of states, maybe 6 or 7 states that don't require Amazon to be the tax collector. So it's really good news for, especially if you're starting an Amazon business, whereas before, you might be thinking about starting an Amazon business and wondering, do I have to collect in all 50 states and register as a business in all 50 states, and probably not even realizing what a massive financial burden it is just to comply with all the laws and rules of these states. Well, now that's less and less an issue, because in the majority of states, except for, like I said, the 6 or 7, Amazon's now the tax collector. But there's still work to be done in that arena. On the one hand, you still, one of the states that hasn't passed the law, which is shocking, is Florida. It's just usually the second biggest state for every seller we meet, right? It's usually California, Florida, New York, Texas, or some, variation of that top 4. But, I'm not necessarily saying people should run out and register in Florida. I'm not, again, I think there's legal issues there, and obviously consult your lawyers before you make any decisions. But, I would certainly be skeptical of any software company telling you, okay, you need to register in Florida now. But the idea is that we're getting there. So, and I think by the end of 2020, we should hopefully be there where all the states are collecting tax. And if it's not all the states, hopefully Florida is there. And if Mississippi doesn't get their act together, well, then that's, Mississippi's problem. Nobody's really worried about back taxes in Mississippi, considering your sales volume there. So that's good news. The bad news is that the states are still, not all the states, but a number, aggressively going after sort of legacy sellers for years of back taxes. So California has been most notably aggressive. And so in response to that, we filed a lawsuit in August, to sort of jumping a little bit ahead, but related to tax. And we sued Amazon and the state of California, and we're seeking to hold Amazon liable for the taxes, because we believe under California law, Amazon was always the seller. It's Amazon's customer. The way California law works and the way Amazon FBA operates, we think Amazon is a seller. So we're taking action to sort of push back and say that Amazon's accountable. But, at the same time, that's not stopping California from going after sellers. So we're still busy, in our law practice, defending those sellers who've, received what they call notices of determination from California. We've had Massachusetts, hasn't been quite as big as California in terms of, number of sellers are going after, but their aggression level is worse in that, we've had clients who've been locked out of their bank accounts because of, a random Massachusetts tax bill will sort of pop up out of the blue. And we have a few active cases in litigation currently in Washington State. And then I've seen Wisconsin. So, which I view as good news, because at the end of the day, if some of you remember, there was this amnesty thing where, states were basically falsely accusing you guys as sellers.
That's what I was going to come on to, because he was using bribery of a timeline, weren't they? But then it was basically, they'll fuck you in the ear on the other side. So they were trying to get you to sign up before the deadline, as if to say, we won't go after you.
Right, exactly.
But there's a double spin on the back end of that. Do you want to explain?
Yeah, so you sign up as if they don't go after you, but then they go after you for income tax, other taxes. And by the time you sign up in all of those 20 odd states, and this was 2017, the deadline's long past, you're in, and they got you. And once they got you, the cost of compliance, and I try to explain to people, like if you're a small business on Amazon, I don't care if you're doing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in sales, 50 state compliance is insanity. Companies like Walmart can deal with it, but small businesses cannot. So it was a huge gotcha for those who did register, and I don't believe many did take advantage of that deal. But we always advocated that it was not a great idea, that the states had a bad legal position. It was probably not going to meet constitutional law in the U.S. And so, and that threat of, hey, if you sign up now, we'll forgive some of these taxes and we won't go after you. I think what we've seen is that, for the most part, overwhelmingly, most states just passed their Amazon marketplace laws and moved on. Like they're not going to, it's not going to be worth their time and effort to go after,
But this is all political, isn't it? So for instance, the state of California, which is one of the biggest states with this issue in hand, like you said, there's of the 7, that is the largest. Is it down to money for political campaigns? It's like someone wants that into their coffers. So it's more of a political thing rather than an Amazon.
Well, it's political. It's not so much for their own political campaigns. I mean, it goes to the general, fund. That it does. This is revenue that funds the state.
Gotcha. Okay,
the decision to go after Amazon was definitely political. We worked with a lot of people in the state lobbying as Online Merchants Guild on behalf of Amazon sellers in the state of California, trying to push for the appropriate tax legislation and protections for sellers. And, we even saw the state treasurer, who used to be in charge of sales tax. She wrote a 6-page letter to the governor. And remember, like I said, she used to be in charge of sales tax. She was like the top person in sales tax in California. So, and in her letter that we have posted on onlinemerchantsguild.org, it's pretty much, 6 pages explaining why you aren't responsible for the tax under our constitutional law, under California state law, and why Amazon should be held accountable. And as she's noted in articles where she's been quoted, and it's obvious that the state has an agenda that's discriminatory. In other words, they obviously want Amazon has 20,000 jobs in the state of California. So from the perspective of California, Amazon is an in-state company. So their hostility towards sellers is, well, sellers are typically out of state. So we're going to go after the out-of-state businesses who we have no interest in those companies. We don't care what happens to them. And we're going to look the other way on Amazon, because in reality, the state had two choices. They could go after Amazon or they could go after the sellers. The law said it was Amazon's responsibility, but they're like, we don't care. We're just going to bully these small businesses because we can and because we like Amazon. And she's noted that in her articles, and it sounds absolutely crazy. But it's actually pretty common in tax litigation to see that. It's just usually it's on a much bigger scale. Like I had a case at Microsoft that went to the California Court of Appeals, and the courts noted that, we were being treated much differently as a Washington state company than another California company, Adobe, and the court called that out as being a discriminatory motive for their treatment of Microsoft. So I mean, it's not new, but it's just what's shameful is the sort of scale of which they're launching this against small businesses, and that's not appropriate, and that raises a lot of other legal issues. And just as an aside, I also teach a constitutional law course on taxes and the state laws in New York. So this is something I nerd out over a lot, sadly.
Well, no, as you say, sadly, but that's to everyone else's benefit. So just going back to, just want to backtrack slightly where we were talking about how you go after Amazon. There's two sides to this, isn't there? Through OMG, you have the activist side of the business, if you like, to going after Amazon that way. And then there's the one where you've got your own clients that are Amazon sellers that are being protected against these issues with the back taxes. So the point I was going to come on to here, how do you go after Amazon? Like for someone who's got a practice of your size, right? Mm-hmm. You go up against the might of Amazon. I know there's law and everything else, but how does that work where they're able, how do you make them take you seriously?
That's a good question. And taking on Amazon in a legal adversarial role is obviously not easy.
It's David and Goliath, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I kind of look at it as a bit of David and Goliath. I kind of call it sort of Achilles in the sense that there's, Amazon might be a monster, but they've got this giant Achilles heel, and I'm just, we're just trying to place pressure on it because that's what needs to be done. And, it's any tax lawyer, state and local tax lawyer knows constitutional law, knows state law. I mean, we all see this for what it is. And I think as a community of tax lawyers, while the majority of my peers, people who I respect as being, the best at what they do, typically aren't, scaled to be helping out small businesses, because typically small businesses shouldn't need, a 50 state tax litigator. That's not really what a typical small business would ever need. And, me being a seller formally in life and paying for law school, selling, and this was important to me. Yeah. And so we sort of adapted to a seller business model. And that's sort of how we launched our practice. But, I think, sometimes the law is the law, and you just don't, we expect Amazon to do what Amazon does in this lawsuit. But, we're ready for it. And, thankfully I was able to connect with 2 other law firms in California that have some might behind them and were willing to help us out with this case because they see it for what it is. And so we actually have 3 law firms engaged again on this case, a class action law firm called Capstone, and another California tax attorney practice, a guy named Marty DeCassian, who's a former partner with a big law firm in the U.S. called Reed Smith, has his own California practice. And we just looked at this issue and just, felt it was wrong. So we brought the case. And, we do, and the case against Amazon is separate from the state's case against sellers. We have to, be very clear about that. We can't, California law doesn't allow us to sort of file to stop the state from going after sellers. So it's 2 different issues. One is who owes the tax, and we think Amazon should pay the tax that they owe California. And, obviously if we eventually win that case and that case gets resolved, it says a lot about what sellers should owe. But right now, both are sort of running in parallel. You've got, like you said, you've got our case against California, and then you have our clients who are individually fighting California, who we represent. And the problem is that those cases could take years to get resolved. Yeah. And we're trying to, handle that, but we're also, looking at the way Amazon sort of, kind of game their way out of the taxes in California and trying to hold them accountable, especially, and there's a bit of poetic justice there, right? That it's like they went after our clients and set our clients up for this. I mean, this was not unintentional. This was, Amazon doesn't like to collect sales tax because when they don't collect sales tax, stuff is cheaper, right? Yeah. So they do this on purpose, but they kind of set up, they kind of set our clients up. They set the sellers up for this, by, kind of not making it clear about, okay, well, you might have this responsibility, you might not, it just was kind of like, they really didn't want you guys to collect. That was the point. They always wanted to have a pool of sellers who didn't have to collect, and that kind of helped them hold their competitive advantage over the years.
Yeah, of course. So switching gears, let's talk about antitrust, Congress and stuff. I'm sure you've been following that. That took place a few weeks ago, where they had to give evidence and stuff. Do you want to give a little bit of background on that and where we are with it all?
So I've been following the antitrust scenario for quite a bit, and I've been talking with the antitrust committee and providing insight and feedback from our community of sellers, from our clients, from our members at Online Merchants Guild, and it's been a really interesting sort of investigation so far. I heard there may be another investigation that Trump may have DOJ launched their own separate investigation compared to what the House Committee on Antitrust is doing. But we saw Amazon and a number of other tech executives testifying on various tech issues. And the interesting thing out of this is we kind of know the issues that Congress is focused in on. One is sort of the dependency on FBA, whether you're sort of locked into FBA when you use Amazon. We certainly feel like we are, that it's sort of like, if we're not an FBA sellers, or if we're not Prime, you can't get the buy box. It definitely is detrimental, but they're really looking at a host of business practice Amazon engages in. And I think most notably the one that seems to be interesting is this one about competing against sellers, right? So you're selling a product and then it's doing really well. And then what data does Amazon then take from you to then decide, okay, we're going to launch a private label competitor and eventually push you out of the market. And it's interesting to see how Amazon represents themselves to the Antitrust Committee compared to how they've represented themselves in tax and in personal injury cases, where we're, in the tax side or in the personal injury side, we're used to Amazon sort of saying, hey, we're just this small, every seller is their own store, their own retailer, and we've always kind of felt that was bullshit, for lack of a better word, because you guys don't have customers, right? You don't have any really, if you were to compare, okay, being a retailer at like the Mall of America to being a retailer on Amazon, you would see the difference, right? Like none of the realities of being a true retailer in a mall exist when you're on Amazon, right? Like, for example, if you go to the Mall of America, every storefront doesn't just say Mall of America in big print and say like Apple Store in tiny print. And, if you have a problem with your iPhone and you're not happy with it, you're not going to go to the Mall of America customer service desk and tell them to force Apple to give you a new iPhone, right? And the Mall of America isn't going to tell, Banana Republic that you can't sign customers up for a list and email promotions to them independently or encourage them to shop outside of the mall. So, I mean, we've always found that, you're a retailer fallacy to be ridiculous. I mean, to be a fallacy, basically. And so it was interesting then to see, okay, in the antitrust context, what is Amazon saying? They're saying, well, basically what we noticed is that in the questions being asked, and there was a written response to a number of inquiries that they submitted after their testimony. And every time they're called a marketplace, we noticed Amazon never refers to themselves as a marketplace anymore. It's their store. It's the Amazon store. You are sellers in the Amazon store. So you're basically, like we've always said, kind of suppliers to Amazon. Yeah. And it's interesting to see that, for antitrust purposes, they're sort of making this argument, it seems, that, our competition against sellers is sort of no different than a common retail practice in stores of having your own store brand. So people familiar with Costco in the US know the Kirkland brand, right? Is anything Costco store brand is called Kirkland. And they're sort of saying that when we launch Amazon private labels, we're just like Kirkland, which is it's just an established practice, not considered anti-competitive. It's our store, and we're just having a store brand. So, and we use the same data that any store would use to determine. So it's just interesting to see them sort of speaking out of both sides of their mouth here. It's like, what is Amazon? Is Amazon a store or is Amazon a mall? And I think, if I were to describe Amazon's answer, I guess the answer is it depends who's asking. But that's not really an appropriate response in a legal context. And that's what I find really surprising about what's going on with this. But, the committee investigation it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they go. It'll be interesting to see what the resolution is. I think people are, growing more and more dependent on Amazon. And I think, for a lot of people, they'd like to be less dependent on Amazon. They'd like to see their own e-commerce businesses, their own Shopify sites flourish. But then again, you look at the tax law, and this is something we deal with our e-commerce clients who do really well on their own, in addition to Amazon. Now that Amazon is doing all the taxes, for example, and then you have your own website, and if you do a couple million there, and now you have to register and pay taxes on all your website sales, it makes you want to revert back to Amazon. Like, people don't want to do it, and it's an epidemic. I mean, and so part of what we're lobbying for is in Congress is to finally, I'm working with some people who've really been vocal on this issue, and we're trying to get Congress to pass better laws on sales tax, because they're the ones who can fix this. Our U.S. Congress can absolutely fix the sales tax thing. We see no reason why not, but until that happens, people who have their own Shopify site and are doing millions, they're like, what, I'm just going to include links to my Amazon site, like product listing on my Shopify site, because then I don't have to deal with sales tax. I don't have to worry about registering. And, they're not wrong. It just sucks that that's where the world's coming to, is that, Amazon wins again.
Yeah, because there was a list of questions. I can't find it. I was just trying to look up now. And I was reading, I think there was 21 questions overall. It's about 8-page document. 8-page. It had 8 sections, 56 pages or so long. And the answers to me were just nonsense, most of them. Because they weren't answering the questions. It's like there was no definition to the answer. It was just waffle in and around the subject without actually, it was non-committal. Nearly every answer to me was very much non-committal.
Yeah, as a lawyer, I call that sort of corporate doublespeak. We're trained to write like that. I mean, especially if you're in corporate law and you work for a big company, and part of my day to day when I was in the big corporations, I had to respond to government inquiries. So, the rule of thumb is you just can't lie. Yeah. You can say something and then it's sort of on the government to then, look at that answer and say, give me more information or explain what you mean by this. And, what you would find is, a lot of times they won't. And so the sort of the rule of thumb is, the way we sort of say, is never never answer more than the question being asked, right? And so it's on them to ask that follow-up question. So we'll see where that goes. But believe me, I pointed some of that out to the committee when I read those answers, and I would invite any seller who wants to take the time to go through those questions and point out other inconsistencies. I have some questions about what they were saying too that I'm trying to get clarity on about, when a product's being sold in Vendor Central, is that, how are they looking at, that data is a little different than the data in Seller Central, and are they really being forthcoming with how they're looking at that? When they're talking about how they compete against sellers and use, general data that's out there, they call it aggregated data. There's some data in Vendor Central that I, as far as I understand, might, call into question what they're trying to say. They're trying to say something that makes it sound like this is all innocent and not, nothing. But, I don't know how, well-versed Congress is in that sort of speak, but my hope is the committee lawyers are used to it, and we'll do that. But I certainly invite anybody who has, contrary experiences or feels like, hey, some of these questions are misleading. One, the Antitrust Committee wants to hear from you. I had the email of the lead attorney. There's an open invite to send her an email and talk to her about whatever you want that you think is important for them to know. They are saying your responses will be confidential. I am not personally guaranteeing any confidentiality, but I can share with you. And if they go on my Facebook group, which is Amazon Sellers Sales Tax Law, even though we do way more than sales tax law, I have a post where you can pull their information and send them emails and share your stories. And I encourage people to do that if you're comfortable doing so, because they need to hear from you. And that's part of what Online Merchants Guild is just like, we're trying to get your voice out there, because if we're not saying anything, then it's just Amazon.
So what other trends have you seen in your practice this year in terms of work? What you've been doing a lot of fake, trademark issues. Oh, that's one I was going to talk to you about. Have you had to deal with this? There's a big trend going on in China with regards to, if you don't have a Chinese trademark, someone else will basically register it, and then they'll hold you to ransom for it because you're unable to get your stock out the country because you can't raise a bill of lading because of the nature of someone else who's got the trademark. So it gets blocked. So people get hit between 30 and 40,000 US dollars, I think it is.
Yeah, I've heard of the practice. I haven't seen it. My partner, who I think is going to be on the show soon or on the podcast soon, he's a 7-figure seller, and he's sort of a lawyer, sort of handles that. But I have heard of that, and that has always been the issue about whether you should get a trademark in China, or when applying for a trademark, should you file a sort of what we call the Madrid Protocol application and get sort of multinational. There's a way you can basically file one application and get your trademark and then set up in a number of countries. It's a much more streamlined approach to prevent that from happening. But that's sort of how the story goes. That in China, if somebody has a trademark on your products and they're sitting in China, they can block you from exporting it. They can block you. They can do a lot. So I haven't seen a ton of those cases. We've been inundated with false infringement cases. We've been getting busy. We saw our supplement clients are seeing some class action movements where we've got these sort of I don't call them bottom feeder lawyers, but just like the kind of lawyers that also may chase
ambulance chasers.
Yeah. Sort of where they'll say, your product doesn't contain, this much of this ingredient, or we tested your product, or, says made in the USA, but it contains this root, ingredient that could not possibly come from the USA. And so we're seeing like a lot of these class action type stuff. So we're trying to, help our clients be better prepared before that, so that if it does happen, they have a better structure in place. So we've been doing a lot of that. I'm excited about the M&A activity. People are selling their businesses more and more. I love helping sellers with that, going through the sale process or through the purchase process of buying an Amazon business. There's a lot of consideration out there. I mean, there's a lot of good brokers out there who help broker those deals, but we think, I just don't understand why people wouldn't want legal cover There's so many issues you don't even realize. People think, oh, I'm buying assets, I'm protected from any potential liability. And it's like, no, there's this concept called successor liability. If you're buying the assets and you're continuing with the brand and you're continuing there's successor liability issues. So you want to really be protected in that space. So that's a trend. It's a good trend. I like seeing, businesses, people selling and recognizing return on their years of hard work. The false infringement, the brands enforcing their rights to control who can sell on Amazon, or their perceived right to control who sells on Amazon, is big. But I don't want to segue too much into what my partner will talk about, but that has been a massive issue this year. And in general, dealing with Amazon and suspensions has been hard. The one thing we did in California, which was more sort of second, third quarter, was we pushed for this AB 1790, which was sort of a seller protection law, which sort of says, Amazon has to give you notice before changing how they suspend you. And I think it resulted in Amazon proactively taking steps that supposedly made suspension better, but I don't think it has. And the law was interesting because, one, when we were lobbying for it, we were asking for a lot. We wanted, for example, a requirement that in order to sell in the U.S. Above a certain amount, you had to have product liability insurance, which, makes perfect sense. I mean, people need to be able to sue somebody if they buy a hoverboard and it burns their house down. And Amazon always disclaims liability, but also, it does obviously prevent that sort of wide open door from, China flooding the market with products that probably don't comply with US laws. I mean, and that's always been sort of one of the ways I think we can advocate to sort of shut that window down, and where you've got sort of Western country sellers, you've got US sellers, UK sellers, we're worried about people suing us. We're worried about losing the assets that we've acquired through our business or personally. And so we tend to take those precautions. But when you're, a factory in China and you just ship a container of goods across the ocean and have no accountability for it, you tend not to follow the rules. And that's what that's kind of how we're trying to address the China problem head on, is to say, well, if Amazon was accountable for the bad things that happen, for the dangerous products, for the, use of chemicals that other sellers wouldn't use, we would see much less of a flood of dangerous products coming to our shores and competing with, the legitimate sellers who are, really taking their businesses seriously, who care about their products, care about their brands, et cetera.
Gotcha. And so going forward for 2020, forward trends, what can you see coming? It's going to be pretty big next year in your realm. Where are we going with stuff?
Where are we going in 2020? So I think 2020 is going to be a year of reconciling sort of e-commerce, like we were discussing earlier, with Amazon, in sense of that, we have to make having your own website, possible. I mean, we can't deny small business owners the ability to have a successful e-commerce website and make us solely reliant on Amazon because of their ability to handle this. So my focus is sort of definitely to sort of, expand the rights of e-commerce business owners so that they can be successful on and off of Amazon. Taxes, obviously, we will see where we go with this back tax issue in California. I'm just waiting for the right case to really bring this to head. But until then, we'll continue to work the process. And I think, really, I mean, all eyes are on the antitrust issue and, what becomes of Amazon. I mean, I think I got to tell you right now, and this certainly goes out to anybody listening to this who's in the US. Although, I mean, there's no reason why this couldn't be run in parallel in Europe and with their anti-competition laws. Congress wants to hear from you. Congress is learning about Amazon. They're learning about that. They don't really even understand that, a lot of Congress people don't even realize that they have constituents who are these small businesses. They don't really understand how big this is in their states and in their districts. And so for me, the focus for 2020 as a advocate is to really help get the word out to our community that we need to be more active, that we need to be calling meetings with our Congress people and letting them know that, we have an interest in this. And people always talk about, how for the last however many years, Amazon has just constantly tilted the playing field in their favor in every aspect, right? Constantly moving the goalpost. I mean, I think 2020 is the year. It's sellers strike back, right? I mean, to use a Star Wars reference, I think that, it's certainly doable. We have this massive opportunity. People want to hear from us. People want to understand what's going on. There are people out there who want to make it better for us. But if we're not organized and we're not getting our message out there, we're going to miss that opportunity. So I really, encourage people to work together, figure out, contact us, but let's figure out how we can work together to make this a better seller environment for us going forward, and sort of, restore the balance of power.
Let's segue here then, because I mean, we were talking off call, but you need a little bit of help, don't you, with OMG? If there's Amazon sellers out there, I know we have a limited amount of time on our hands. Like I've been doing recently, do a bit of charity work, raise a bit of money, and in and out. We find those pockets of time. But I think if anyone's listening to the show, you're looking for some help there as well. Some activists out there who are interested, on a part-time basis. Would that be right in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for leaders, we're looking for doers, we're looking for anybody. Maybe you have a VA who's very good at, keeping websites. I mean, we're looking for those people who want to be a part of the solution, maybe they have an interest in politics, maybe they have an interest in shaping the future of this, and they see the mission. The problem I have when I talk to people is I'm not a seller business, and if I am, I'm just one.
Yep.
People really, we need, this organization needs to be run by you, right? I mean, I've always said that this is your organization. I love the mission. I love doing the work that I can do as a lawyer that makes sense for me to do, but there's a lot of work that I probably should not be doing. And to be honest, really it's meant for you guys. Like, it's the work that helps us connect, the authenticity of being from seller to seller, right? I mean,
yep.
We need that. So we need help. So obviously we need to raise money. I think, for me, my goal is, I think the organization needs to be engaged with the right lobbyists in Congress, and we need people in Capitol Hill constantly delivering our message to Congress, to the Senate, to the House, to whatever administrations are in power. I'm neutral to all politics here, because the only politics I care about right now are the politics of who's pro-seller, yeah. Right? Who's pro-Amazon seller. That is the only political position I'm taking. I recognize our clients and our members come from all walks of life, and we all have views. But I think this is the year where we, as sellers, need to be pro-seller, and we need to get that message delivered to Congress in the U.S. And so we're looking for those people who can help us, one, grow as an organization, raise money, so that we can accomplish that, but also be active leaders in our organization. We're looking for those people who really, I like the idea of being a voice and being a part of, leading a movement of sellers and building a sort of a power base of sellers.
So what would be the best approach to reach out to you? Like, is any subject matter in the subject line they would put to identify it, like a message direct to you? Just, is it for activists, or how would you like our audience to contact you if they're obviously interested in getting involved in some, working on a part-time basis and helping out on the organizational side? Yes,
absolutely. So, and there have been people who've reached out to me in the past, and if you are listening, we will be reaching out back to you as well. This is we're for 2020, we're looking to really revamp how things are run. So what I would say is send an email to paul@onlinemerchantsguild.org. I know it's a lot to say, onlinemerchantsguild.org, paul@onlinemerchantsguild.org. And yeah, just put getting involved. Great subject heading. The organization is open. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. The only thing we're very strict about and very careful about is who our members are, because we do recognize that a lot of our members love what we do, but they are a little bit afraid of Could there be retaliation? Could there be that,
Yeah.
and that's a fair point. I don't necessarily believe that that's probably going to happen, but I get it. Your livelihood depends on this, but your livelihood also depends on, this being a fair, marketplace, and with one company just constantly overreaching and taking advantage of us, it's just, you see where it's going. You see where it's going with, the increased suspension hostility, with this sort of pro-China sellers, anti-US sellers approach that Amazon seems to be taking to encourage, lots of competition and low prices in our marketplace, that, regardless of the quality of the goods, we've got to do something here. So really, I mean, your livelihood also depends on us getting, getting that balance of power restored. So, get involved, and however you want to be involved. If you want your involvement to be confidential, if you want to be a very vocal, outspoken representative of the organization, if you want to be a board member, if you want to be a leader, like, we're open. It's all open season. We just want sellers to now. I really want this to be the year sellers take ownership of this.
Cool.
For real.
Sounds good. Well, guys, you've got your orders there. Reach out to Paul. Paul, thank you so much for coming in today. Guys, if this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.
Thank you.